The other evening, you spoke on bhakti and devotion and said that whatever we are doing, we need to remember that we're doing it for God. How does this relate to those who find themselves working as prostitutes, child laborers, etc.? So, when we talk about doing it for God, we obviously have to take almost anything we do, in any case, beyond the most basic. I'm going shopping for clothes. Well, you're going to have a hard time convincing yourself that you're doing that for God. It's a perfectly harmless, fine, natural, innocuous thing to do. I haven't even gotten to the prostitutes and child laborers side yet. We're just talking about getting a new pair of shoes. Nonetheless, you're going to have a hard time saying to yourself, oh, well, these shoes are for God. God wanted me to have a new pair of shoes. God thought that, you know, my old clothes made me look really bad, and so God's the one. I mean, it would be a good rationalization of why you're spending so much money shopping, but not a real deep and honest experience. When I talk about doing it for God, it's the awareness of the fact that all is God. Let me back up for a minute. There are several different layers and levels of existence that are operating simultaneously. And we get confusion when we start mixing and matching levels. And it's none that's better or worse, but for example, on the highest, truest, deepest level, there is nothing but God. Not just one God, but literally nothing but God. We have mantras, we have teachings, we have an incredible amount of emphasis placed in the scriptures by the sages, by the saints, in their commentaries on the scriptures, on the fact that there is nothing but God. Now that's one level of existence, meaning everything else is an illusion. On that level of existence, if that's really, really where you're going to try to live from, which you could call sort of the pinnacle of the Gyan Yoga path, if you got into a program, a path on Vedanta, especially on Advaita Vedanta, if you were going to dedicate yourself to the path of wisdom, the path of Gyan, okay. Nothing but God. Everything else is an illusion, including the body, including any separation between us, including anything I'm doing. All of that is an illusion. There is nothing but God. Now that's a very difficult level and place to live from. It's a beautiful and deep and incredible teaching to hold in your heart and your mind in terms of ultimate truth. When you get stuck in your identities and you get stuck in traffic, literally and metaphorically, it's really a spiritually soothing remembrance of, oh yeah, wait, this isn't about reaching there on time. This isn't about that. It's not about this. It's all God. But it's a very difficult place to live from 24 hours a day. It's doable. It's an incredible ideal. I'm not saying don't aim for it. By all means, aim for it. just don't berate yourself if you can't achieve it constantly. If you find yourself coming back into the one who needs new shoes or who wants new shoes, or coming back into any aspect of the identity, any desire, any fear. Because remember, if it's all God, nothing to desire at all, nothing to fear. I mean, worst comes to worst, I die, right? I mean, that's pretty much the bottom line of every fear that I have. End of the day, worst case scenario, what happens if my fear comes true? I die. Well, if everything's God, then it doesn't matter. This whole thing was just an illusion anyway. So that's one level. It is absolutely the highest, the truest level. But it's also, as I said, a difficult level to live on 24 hours a day. Then I don't want to say come down, we go sideways a level. We adjust the dial on our, internal radio or TV or whatever tuning we're doing of our levels. And on the next level, I'm this being. I'm a, spiritual being having a human experience, or a human being having a spiritual experience. Either way, I'm this being. And I have a body, and I respond to my body. It's hungry. I start thinking about food. I plan meals. I look at other people. I see them as separate from myself. I try to be nice to them and kind to them and a good person, but nonetheless, I don't see them as God. I see them as other people. I see myself as a person, and in that personness, I'm going to dedicate myself to improving myself, developing myself as much as I can, spiritually, psychologically. I'm going to do good things for other people, okay? So it's another level of reality. Also true, just not quite as true as the first level. But it is true. We do have a body. It's not an illusion. Even on the first level, it's not an illusion like an optical illusion. It's not the water in the desert type of illusion. It's not you've gone blind, you can't see, that's why you think you have a body. It's just an illusion as in it's not who I am. Body exists, not me. It means it's not me. Next level, okay, I'm here. I'm a person. I have goals, I have dreams, I have fears, I have all of that. I want to buy a pair of shoes. Go to another level. I am this body. There is no spirit, it's just body. As many years as I have, I've got to use them, just eat, drink, and be marrying. Why would I want to do something for someone else unless I can get something from them? It's all about you versus me. My entire focus is this body, this identity, this experience, how much I can acquire. How much I can stuff inside, how much I can put outside, new clothes, new shoes, more food. Titles, degrees, money, name, fame, all of that. It's all about me. So we could keep going, but I'm going to end there. The point being, these are all different levels. Takes us to the example that I give so frequently about the waves in the ocean. If you've got a wave in the ocean, and you look at that wave, well, there's two levels of reality there. On one level, there's just ocean, nothing but ocean. On another level, that's a wave. Now, they're both true, but if we really thought about it, what we'd realize is ocean is a bit truer than wave. Why is it truer than wave? Because the wave exists momentarily, instantaneously. A tiny intersection of time and space is wave. This moment, this place, wave. But ocean is eternal. I mean, if we envisioned an ocean that didn't have coasts, so there wasn't a Pacific and an Atlantic, but just nothing but ocean. Well, that's going to be a higher truth than wave. Although wave is also true, it's just true at this tiny intersection of time and space. It's a form of ocean. What is the wave? It's ocean. If you look at the wave under a microscope, it looks exactly like ocean. No scientist could look at it under a microscope and say, that was wave. It would tell you this is ocean. And yet, seeing a wave doesn't mean you've gone blind. It doesn't mean you've invented it or made it up. It's just a different level of reality. It's a slightly less eternally true level of reality. So now we circle back to the specific question. Let's say you have a job as a prostitute or as a child laborer. How do you reconcile doing that for God? Well, what we've just done there is we've crossed levels. So we've taken my role, my job, my identity, and have said, I'm going to identify as that. I'm going to identify as a prostitute. I'm going to identify as the child laborer. But then I'm going to cross into there's nothing but God, therefore it's God who's making this happen level. And this is where we get confused. And it is confusing. You don't be a prostitute, or be a child laborer, or be a CEO. And tell yourself it's all for God as though God needs that. You don't do anything telling yourself it's for God on that physical level. God doesn't need anything from us. Even the pujas that we do. We perform, that's clearly just for God, right? I'm performing a worship ceremony. Well, I'm offering flowers, I'm offering water, I'm offering incense, I'm offering fire. God doesn't need that. God doesn't need my rice. God doesn't need my ghee. God put the flowers on the plants. He doesn't need me to pick them off and offer them. The puja is for God in that through doing the puja, I connect to God. What God wants from us is for us to connect with God. What God wants from us is for us to recognize that God is within us, that we are one with God. That's what God wants. Not your rice, not your ghee, not your flowers, not your incense, not your company, not any of the things that we actually do. What God wants is us to connect. Our connection, our devotion, our love. So the teaching that I was speaking about in terms of doing it for God is not envision that it is God who wants me to prostitute myself, but in whatever I'm doing, whatever it is, how can I think of God? In fact, there's actually a story about this of two men, and one of them considered himself very, very, very pious. The other one did not consider himself quite so pious. But nonetheless, they were friends. And one day, the one who considers himself very pious said, I am going to go to the temple and I am going to meditate and pray all night long. And the other guy said, I'm going to go to a brothel. And And the one who was very pious said, you know, you are such a sinner and you're going to go to hell and God hates you and you're a horrible person and, you know, all of that. And the guy who was going to the brothel, he kind of knew that. It wasn't like he thought that it was a good thing. It was just that he knew, you know, I can't overcome my addictions. I'm not a spiritual person and I'm a bad person. And so one goes to the temple, one goes to the brothel. The one in the temple spends his whole night thinking about his friend who is such a sinner. And why is he friends with such a sinner? And he really has to find himself, you know, better friends because this guy is a horrible man and how dare he go to the brothel? And when he goes to the brothel, my God, is he going to have sex with only one lady or maybe more? And this man's desire is just insatiable. And how did I get stuck with a friend like that? And the other guy goes to the brothel. And the whole night is thinking, my God, I've been so blessed to be given this friend who's in the temple. And God, he must be doing Abhishek right now. And even he's in the brothel, but he's thinking, my friend is doing Abhishek. My friend is doing puja. My friend is doing arti. My friend is meditating. And I'm so worthless and horrible. But somehow I was given this friend who's so pious. They both die that night. It's a story, so things like that can happen. They both die. So otherwise the story becomes too long if you have to go through like all the rest of their years of life. So they both die that night. And the one who spent the night in the brothel gets taken to heaven. And the one who spent the night in the temple gets taken to hell. And as he's going to hell, he sees this other guy on his way, you know, up to heaven. And he says to God, he's like, what is this? This guy, not 24 hours have passed since this guy was in a brothel. I spent the last 24 hours of my life doing puja. And God said, he said, yes, but your mind, your attention, your body was in the temple, but your mind was in the brothel. This guy, even being in the brothel, his mind was in the temple all night. All night he was thinking, Abhishek, Arti, this. You whole night were thinking, how many ladies is this guy having sex with? What's he doing in the brothel now? And we're given these, you know, teaching stories to remind us. It's not as simple as what you do. It's about where you are in your mind when you're doing it. And so the do it for God means whatever you're doing, wherever you are, whatever role you have in the world, are you the CEO? Are you the window washer? Are you the president? Are you the secretary? Are you the clerk? Are you the chairman of the board? Whatever you are, do whatever you're doing with an awareness that God is in me. Do it in a way to connect with God. Now, a last point bears mentioning, since the examples given were so dire. And of course, since it then begs the question, well, what if I steal and murder and do those things? If I do it, you know, thinking about God, does that mean it's okay? If you're really thinking about God, not the God who's going to give you something, not the God who's a vending machine, not the God who's Amazon.com, not the God who is into, you know, presents and treats and who's gonna hand you something. But But the God who's the creator, the God who's infinite, the God who wants nothing from you but for you to be connected. Not the God who's telling you, sacrifice animals, sacrifice virgins, kill this, kill that. Not that. Because remember, God is infinite. God doesn't need this in the fire, that in the fire. God needs your ego in the fire. God needs your separateness in the fire, your identity in the fire. Not his creation in the fire. So if you are deeply connected to God by any name, any form, any religion, any culture, any language, it doesn't matter. But if you are really deeply connected to God, you won't be able to rob or to kill. Because you will see in the one you are killing God. Because God is infinite. You will see in the one from whom you're stealing God. You will experience your own fullness and completeness. There is no need to steal. There is no need to covet. There is no need to have greed or competition because I'm full. So if you're wondering about, well, if I just take God's name, is it still okay to do these things? If you really take God's name and you really connect with God, you automatically won't be doing those things. In terms of the stealing and the killing and whatnot. Lastly, though, coming back to the very specifics of the question, of the prostitute, of the child laborer, there are people who are in situations in this world, and it's more than just child prostitutes or child laborers. There are people in situations in this world that they are in, not because God put them there, but because we, who God has created with intelligence, with compassion, with love, instead of using the intelligence and the compassion and the love in our own ignorant identification with our body, in our ego, in our greed, we have created a society in which, whether it's child laborers, whether it's prostitutes, whether it's homeless people, all of them exist because we have complicitly created a society that says, I am a body, I am an object, I have desires, I should be able to purchase whatever I want for my desire. Hence we have prostitutes. We have child laborers because I am a body. That body wants to accumulate money. My identity is how much money I make. I own a company. Costs way too much of my profits to hire people who aren't slaves, to pay them fair wages, to give them fair working conditions, fair working hours, much, much cheaper, to enslave them. More left for me at the end of the day. I can only sell a pair of shoes or a shirt for so much. As much of that as I spend paying my employees, it's less in my pocket. Paying the manufacturers, it's less in my pocket. That's a society we have all been complicit in creating. We want things for cheaper. We want more and more of them. Because as I feel empty, I want to buy things. Buying things makes me feel full. So people who are selling them want to sell them for cheap, so I'll buy more. If they want to sell for cheap and still make money, a lot of it, boom, child labor. Boom, sweatshops. This is not God's doing. God has created us, and along with intelligence and compassion and love and creativity, He has also given us free will. And when we use that free will to push away our compassion and our intelligence and our love, and to embrace our egos and our desires and our ignorance, this is what happens. So it's not God who has done that. It's us who have done that.